Hello and welcome to Outpost Gray, everyone, where I provide you information in innovation, technology, and cybersecurity. If this is your first time here, welcome to my channel. I'm thrilled to have you. It would mean the world to me if you hit that subscribe button. And I know you haven't watched the show yet, but I know you're going to like it. So I'd love it if you hit that like and then you shared it out with others. Now, for all my repeat offenders and everybody that's in the community, thank you so much for supporting me and for being here and watching these videos, liking them and sharing them out. You all are the reason that I do what I do. So thank you so much. If you don't know me, I'm your host, Jack Scott, and I try to provide content weekly within the space of innovation, technology, and cybersecurity. And I do that through various platforms using either panels, fireside discussions, or just general conversations about what is happening in our world today. And that could include AI, machine learning, or like today, we're going to be talking about some things that I'm really passionate about, which is the cybersecurity maturity model. That's also known as the CMMC. It's actually the cybersecurity maturity model certification is that last C. And it is in some ways controversial. If you're in the federal space, you probably know about this. And the two experts that I have on the show today are experts in this arena, and they're going to be sharing some insights into that. But more importantly, we're going to be talking about what they do within supply chain risk and how they help companies with risk management. So the guests that we're going to have on the show that you get to meet today are with an organization called Cyturus. It is a continuous compliance and risk management platform. And David Glynn, the Chief Revenue Officer, has got over 20 years of experience. He's in the green room right now. I can see him. He has worked in information technology and in business sales. He has also helped various types of organizations with channel development, project management, and even team building. And he and I actually met on the wonderful platform, if you guys are familiar with it, good old Clubhouse. And then from there, we connected about CMMC because it was at kind of a height of conversation at that time. And I was actually had the honor to be part of a panel that he was putting on. So that was a really cool experience. And then also today, we have the CEO of Cyturus, and he also is coming in with over 30 years of experience in the technology space. And his experience ranges from consulting to executive leadership roles within various technology companies, including Dell. And his path eventually led him to founding this organization. So without me continuing to talk, we're going to go ahead and we're going to bring the guests onto the show and we're going to make this happen. Stay tuned. Welcome, Robert. Welcome, Dave. So happy to have you guys on the show. How are you doing?
Doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having us on the show today.
Absolutely excited about this conversation. We were talking a little bit offline on some of the things that we're going to talk about. So I say let's dive in. But first, I'm going to kick it over to you, Robert. I would love for you to share a little bit about why did you create this organization and talk about the name. It's a really unique name.
Well, I appreciate the question. And we do get that a lot. And if you look at the word Cyturus and you look at the word maturity in Latin, it's maturus. And you drop that MA and you add CY for cyber. Cyturus is quite literally cyber maturity. And that's what we do as an organization.
Yeah, and you had to have had, I'm guessing, other names. That's just very creative. And I love that name because maturity, we talk about cybersecurity maturity in this space a lot, but I don't know if people actually understand what that fully means. But your company, and you can hear it in your name, your company is all about helping organizations become cyber mature. Can you talk a little bit more on some of the ways that you do that and you help these organizations with their maturity?
Absolutely, Jax. And this is, as you can tell, passionate. And I founded the company because this did not exist in the industry. As a consultant, we were spending a lot of our time coming in behind, whether it be the PwCs, the Deloittes, and we would get these, 500-page, full ream of paper report and 126 slide deck. And the company was left questioning, okay, what do we do? We've got 12 months to fix something in this report. And then they're going to come back and give us another assessment. Now, executives are making decisions based on a report in the review mirror. And so this idea of continual compliance, continual maturation was needed. Well, in order to do that, you must have a platform, something that gives you constant improvement, measures that improvement, lets the business know that this is where we were month over month, this improvement or not. And this quarter over quarter, now we have gone from here, which is that quantification piece, to now we've improved to here. And this is our improvement in our maturity. This is our reduction in our business risk. This is the removal or at least limitation of those risks to the delivery of business services. And so you have to look at things from an impact perspective. You have to look at things from a business perspective, and then understand that not only are you measured against compliance, because organization, as you mentioned earlier with CMMC and others, you have all of these various compliance methodologies that companies are being hit with from every direction. So they have to have compliance risks, as you said, supply chain risks, vendor risk management. There's all of these business risks, and you have to be able to put that into a single pane of glass. And I really just like that word, but people are looking for that single way of looking and articulating that to senior leadership in a way that's visual, so they can understand we spent this amount of money and this is the expected return, and you can quantify that.
And that is a great segue into what I wanted to talk about, because money talks. We know that money is a big motivator for executive leadership. Especially now we're seeing a lot of organizations that are willing to put the money and spend and put the budget into that cybersecurity, but it wasn't always that way. And I noticed when I was going through your website and looking at diving deep into the services that you provide, I was looking through and realizing, okay, cyber risk management and compliance, as you mentioned, it's a very complex. It can be very confusing. It can be very costly. Something that I really liked is that your organization talks about cyber risk quantification. And I was like, okay, I'm going to Google this, make sure I get this right so I don't mess this up. And simply put, within the research that I found, it's the process of measuring IT and cyber risk exposure and putting it into monetary terms. And I thought that was really interesting. So I'm gonna kick this over to Dave, actually. And I want to know, like, we all know, again, money is a key motivator for executive leaders. So can you explain how you've leveraged cyber risk quantification to imply cyber risk management and compliance to help leaders be better risk informed?
Absolutely, Jack. So as you mentioned in the introduction, I've actually been in technology for 30 years, cybersecurity for 20. So I'm not quite as old as Robert, but I'm close. And in that period of time, one of the things that we see time after time is that organizations spend money on security in a way that isn't always strategic. And what I mean by that is we'll often throw money at problems when that's not necessarily what has to happen. With cyber risk quantification, it actually allows you to measure technology spend against business objectives. And more importantly, to understand from a risk-based perspective, how do I protect the things that are most important to my organization? And so when we talk cyber risk quantification, it's a really good way of being able to look at your organization and figure out what have those dollars purchased, what have those dollars gotten me? What kind of return it's really hard to show a positive ROI from a cybersecurity spend. A lot of people see cybersecurity and risk as sort of a money pit, as a place all the money goes into the Department of No. So quite simply, cyber risk quantification allows you to measure your risk posture against business objectives, and then show value in your purchases, show iterative growth over time. And it's been really hard to measure in the past. And we've got a really unique platform that allows organizations to get visibility into what they're doing, make positive choices that allow them to remediate things faster and avoid not completely avoid risk, but mitigate things in a way that helps keep them ahead of their competition. And as importantly, helps them from getting in trouble with regulators and the board. So yeah, that's really risk quantification.
And how are you able to work with the clients that you have, and you're providing them this data and you're providing them in monetary terms, but how are you being able to communicate that cyber risk and measuring that IT in a way that it's easy for them to not only understand, but to also get away from saying the no and increasing that budget maybe for more cybersecurity to help them increase their maturity, for example? Does that question make sense?
Total sense.
Okay.
I'll let Robert dig into this one outside of the fact that, when you're able to show these things to leadership and show these things to your board and prove out how the investments that you made are helping the organization, it becomes a lot easier to get them to make positive spend in that direction. And when you as a cybersecurity risk professional understand the business objectives of the organization, it allows you then to align your asks with what the business is asking for. I don't know, Robert, you can probably riff on that a little bit.
Dave, you're absolutely correct. And I really appreciate that segue into it, because that is so important. Is the business has historically recognized or assumed that cybersecurity was an IT problem.
Yep.
And if they give them money, IT is going to solve the problem. And that just simply isn't the case. And so now what we're able to do is truly articulate back to the business that there are business decisions, there are business risks, there are impacts, and these are monetary impacts to the business. And then something you mentioned earlier in the broadcast was now that board and those senior leaders have personal accountability. We see CEOs and CISOs now in front of the courts where they are being indicted on things. And so now with this personal accountability, they're asking the harder questions. They're not saying, hey, by the way, in an elevator conversation, are we secure? They're asking, what are we doing? How are we in our compliance? How are we in our maturity model? How do we measure against those around us? And so they're asking the harder questions. And to Dave's point, what is that ROI? What is that return for our investment? Are we spending in the right places? Are we reducing the potential of business risk the best way we can? How do we measure that, into your words, and in what we do? How do we quantify those actions?
And how can you possibly do that without visibility into what you're doing, without really structured visibility? Instead of just holding things on Excel spreadsheets and putting them in a file somewhere, how do you get a global picture of what you're doing in the organization? In my 30 years as a technology consultant and 20 years in cybersecurity, I've been asked that question a number of times. And candidly, before I came to Cyturus, I've never been able to reasonably answer that question. There are a lot of technology platforms that I've engaged with in the past that people spend millions of dollars in integrating, and they may get one component of that right. But if you're not aggregating that information in a way that gives you business visibility to it, it's very difficult to have that communication. And Robert just mentioned the CEO and CIO risk and personal accountability. There's a couple of really interesting court cases that are current, where you've got the FTC putting forth a mandate, a sanction that's going to follow the CEO from company to company. So it's not just against the company; it's everyone the CEO ever works for from here on out have those same restrictions on it. So I think that the playing field's changed. We've realized as an industry that we need better visibility. We've realized as a group of practitioners that we're going to be held accountable. So having documentation, having people sign off on things, making sure that you have proof that you've taken something to the business as a practitioner is now so much more important than it was before.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And it's critical. I'm going to pivot a little bit for us because I want us to talk about some third-party risk management. And I want to dive a little bit in this because this is a challenging area also. It's very challenging because of various different things. That includes, like, what about network complexity of just yours and the third parties? You touched on this, Dave, but like heightened regulatory pressure, certain things that are going to be coming down that you have to be in compliance to work in a particular place. And then the ever-changing technology is just constantly impacting us, emerging technology, how the adversary is getting faster and quicker. And then there are just different types of TPRMs, which include, we have the strategic risk, we've got reputation risk, operational risk, and then information security risk. So it's very complex. I don't think a lot of people actually understand how complex it is. And so I'm curious, I'm I'm going to ask Robert this question, but Dave, I'd love to have your input on it. How does Cyturus tackle all of these risks and then help the company stay secure in this ever-changing environment?
Well, Jax, you really did a good job of framing that up. And you're absolutely correct. And it starts with the reputational risk. We look at companies that have suffered, and their actual reputational suffrage has been in the 7, 8, 9-figure range. You look at those that have, we talk about vendor risk management, and you say, oh, well, I've got 20 vendors. Well, we've got companies that have 1,000+ vendors. You look at manufacturing companies. How do you manage all of the risks associated? And so you have to have that integration into your corporate risk register. In that risk register, you have to be able to aggregate those risks and understand, oh, they're a vendor, so they're a risk. No. Are they a reputational risk? Are they what types of data? And you talked about, is it going to be an informational? Well, do they maintain or have access to your EPHI if it's medical? Do they have informational? Is it things that are covered under an NDA or things that are covered under a BAA? You have to understand what that potential risk is. And then from that third party, you can't, it's not one size fits all. You can't just send them a vendor risk assessment. We used to send out SIGs and SIGs Lights and these others and say, okay, answer these 50 or 500 questions, pick a number, and that's all you have to do, fill them out. Now it needs to be very specific. Okay, you are a SaaS platform and you have access to critical data and you have potential reputational impact to us and to our clients. You need this level of risk assessment, and we have to put you in this level of risk to our business. Well, here's somebody that delivers paper to you every month. They don't need the same type of risk assessment that this one over here does. And so you've got to tier that risk. You've got to understand what the risk is to that delivery of business service, the risk to your business, classify those risks, and then appropriately identify those risks and allow those organizations to respond to that. And then you have to do that regularly. Then you have to monitor that. And you have to understand if there's something that's happened to their business, it could have downstream impact on yours. So there's this entire process of the classification, the topology, the understanding what those VRAs and the vendor risk assessments are, understanding what you're going to do with that data. It's no longer just a spreadsheet that's filled out and, well, we checked that box. We're good for another year. Send you another one next year. Thanks. There's so much more complexity that needs to be involved so that you get true business value and you're managing the risk, not managing the risk assessment.
Oh, that's such a great quote right there. I love that. Spot on. I think so many organizations forget that they're managing the risk because they go down that very deep rabbit hole of the risk assessment. And they're all about what are the findings? How do we mitigate them? But they forget about the overarching, what are we looking at here? I wanted to see, Dave, do you have anything to add to what Robert just said?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think one thing that I'd emphasize from Robert's dialogue about it, which was spot on, by the way. We go through these cycles in cybersecurity, and we know that you're only ever as strong as your weakest link. So we spent a lot of time focusing on insider threat, and there's been these taglines like human-centric cybersecurity and well-meaning insiders and all of these things, which definitely all still exist. But if you really step back and take a look at it, in our interconnected world, it has become ever so much easier for malicious attackers to jump from organization to organization. We have this interconnected trust model where, when I first got into cybersecurity, it's pretty simple. You had one connection to the internet, you threw a good firewall up, you had good antivirus, and you kicked the tires a bit and you were done. Well, things started getting more complex, and we introduced intrusion prevention, intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, and other layered defense in-depth security practices. But what that didn't take into account is those trust relationships between you and other organizations, your customers, your suppliers, and that's in B2B and in B2C. If you think about patient records, even at a doctor's office, I have an application that I access my doctor's office. It's called Helo, and in Helo, I have access to my medical records, from my cell phone. So everything from the very simple things that you do on a daily basis to manage your own personal health, all the way to these trust relationships with vendors, that creates an additional level of vulnerability and risk. And so The other thing I wanted to emphasize from what Robert said is, so the landscape's changed because we have all these trust relationships. We've spent a lot of time focusing not on those things, so we've barricaded our front door, but we've left the side door open, to use a clumsy analogy. But the other thing that I wanted to draw your attention to is that the ability to tie your third-party risks into the rest of your risk infrastructure. So without the ability to see that from a global perspective, part of the beauty of what we do is we allow people, as Robert mentioned, we tie it into the risk register, but we're able to tie third-party risk into our policies. We're able to tie third-party risk into our business interactions. We're starting to, through some various things I think we'll talk about in a little bit, we are starting to help organizations recognize that it is a business advantage to be able to prove their level of risk, their level of risk preparedness, their documented information security plan, their tested, their third-party validated level of protection, especially when handling the most sensitive of documentation.
Yeah, that was well said. I want to actually, you were doing such a great job teeing up what I wanted to talk about. So I'm going to punt it back to you on this question, Dave, because when I was doing some research for this interview, you're absolutely right on, we kind of go through cycles, and you were talking about insider threat. And we right now there is what I've noticed, there is a big uptick in third-party risk services, but there's also an uptick with third-party risk. And I wanted to know from both of you all, from what I've researched, I'm just curious, do you believe that some of the escalation that you're seeing around this could be also due to the global recession, maybe causing some of the surge to companies, like they're downsizing and then they're going, we need to outsource our services now. And so now they're outsourcing more and they're going, man, we need another company that can help us scale with our third-party risk. I'm just curious of your thoughts of that.
Yeah, so I'll start that and then kick it over to Robert. I really like his perspective on this. We talk about this a lot. Is the global recession affecting that? Absolutely. I think the global nature of business is affecting that.
Yes.
We've got nation state actors that are partially, our cyber warfare is at a level right now where it's not just about people maliciously doing something. It's also about a global information race, and that global information race is really who get to market fastest. How can we build these things the fastest? How can we? And that's existed for a long time. But if you tie these things together with what's, this general nature of information sharing, and we've really put ourselves in a little bit of a dangerous position. And so, the economy always impacts this. Everything from disgruntled employees to recognizing that speed to market, levels of competitiveness. It's not just the difference between a couple of points to shareholders. It's the difference between staying in business and not. And for some people, it's the difference between feeding their family and not. And when you have stakes like that, when you have things at stake like that, people make dumb decisions. And so you can't ever get rid of the human factor in this. And so I think all those things tie together. I know, Robert, you've got some interesting ideas on this. If you want to.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. And part of what you talked about is true. It's the global business. It's where we are doing business globally, 24/7. And you talked earlier about we barricaded the front door, but we've got so many other entrances now within our businesses. And this is both positive and negative. And you talked, Jax, you talked about global recession. That has a tendency to limit spend, limit budgets. And so we make poor decisions and we probably take shortcuts in places we shouldn't. But on the flip side of that, we now have opportunities that we didn't. We have customers that have plants around the world. And now we're being hit with compliance requirements, German automotive manufacturing compliance called TISAX. It's impacting U.S.-owned companies, U.S. manufacturing companies that have to meet these global requirements. Of course, we haven't talked about GDPR and others. And so you have all of this globalism, if you will, this global economy that is driving this. And then, as Dave said, you have these nation-state actors And we can go down the list. We know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these, a large percentage of their GDP is based on cyber terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got threat actors. It's no longer about just, impacting our ability to deliver business services to improve their exports. It's about understanding and gaining that information technology, gaining those intellectual properties. It's industrial espionage. It is impacting that financial ends for the entities, for the companies. And so there's a lot of drivers, and we are now seeing this from a global stage, and it's no longer some kid in his mom's basement in a hoodie that's sitting there at a keyboard. You've got well-educated, well-paid employees of nation states that are now, this is their job. And so that's what we're up against. That's what we're dealing with. And it can no longer be a lackadaisical attitude of, we're a small company, we don't have to worry about it. Well, as Dave said, you're a small company today, something major happens, you're not going to be in business tomorrow.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, and it is, I think that it's really good to note that this is, like you said, this is a business for cyber threat groups to hack our organizations and attack us all the way. I mean, when we talk about groups, they're not always nation state threat groups. That's why these organizations that are the small mom and pops that think we're not going to get hit, they're the ones that are going to get hit by the script kiddie or maybe the smaller group. They're not the nation state. That's where I think a lot of people are confused, is the nation state may not go after you. They're going to go after the Capital Ones or the DoD or the agencies. That's part of their motivation and what they're historically known for. But there are a lot of individuals that are in their tweens that are hacking at home. And that's actually what we have to be more worried about, is the securing our environment, because there's just so many individuals. Curiosity is key. It's so easy. We have so much at our fingertips. And imagine us, if we were 5 years old, 10 years old, the capabilities that we have then versus when we were younger, and being able to get into that technology space. And it's wild to even imagine that.
Jax, it is wild. In fact, I want to give you a scenario. If you're a small law firm, as an example, one lawyer, couple employees, but you do mergers and acquisitions, it's very profitable to have your systems impacted, breached, because there is business advantage, insider trading information of upcoming mergers and acquisitions on your little machine that's sitting on your desk. And now a trader can start shorting stocks or buying stocks prior to a mergers and acquisition, prior to something that's happening. And there have been people that have found guilty of this and gone to jail for insider trading, because these individuals and nation states are hacking those smaller and smaller entities, because those threat vectors have now gone downstream. You're no longer going to go after a Capital One because they've got a $10 million budget against this, but their third parties, as we just talked about, their attorney firms, there's outsourcing, don't have those big budgets. Yeah. Now they can come at that information through that external vector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is such a great point. And I think I want to just reiterate how vulnerable an organization like Capital One can be. I actually joined Capital One right after their big breach that they had, and they're extremely secure, but they're only as secure as their weakest link. And that is, again, going back to vendors and supply chain risk. And that's why it's so extremely complex and very hard to manage that. But your organization is doing it. So phenomenal job. I want us to pivot in for the last couple minutes and talk about the cybersecurity maturity model. This is a great hot topic. I love it. It was, just for everybody that's listening, really quick context. In 2019, the DoD announced the cybersecurity maturity model certification. I always forget the last C on it. So the CMMC was created for a certification for organization that worked in the defense industrial base, known as the DIB, and that worked with and handled CUI data, confidential, unclassified confidential, controlled, unclassified information. Yeah.
There you go, CUI.
Thank you. So what they were doing, the purpose of it was to secure the supply chain. Bottom line, we need to secure the defense industrial base. So it's been a hot topic. It is on, it is off, it is on. There has been a refinement to it. So I'm curious, what is your organization? Because this is an area that you serve in. So what is your organization doing to help A, keep your companies just current within this space? And then B, how are you serving them within this space to prepare them for this big shift? And I'll pass it to Robert.
Yeah. Jax, I really appreciate it. And there's a lot of misinformation that's been out there, and it's circulating, and folks are thinking, well, this is something new. It's a shift. Well, if you go back and recognize that since 2017, DoD contracts have included what they call a 7012 clause. And a 7012 clause means that they have attested that they are compliant with DFARS 800-171. If you look at the 800-171, it's 110 controls, which are the exact same 110 in CMMC. And so companies have been attesting that they are compliant with 800-171 already. And so now companies are realizing, wait a minute, you mean we actually had to do that? And the nice thing about CMMC, and one of the things that I really appreciated, is this whole framework that the Cyber AB put in place for the DoD. And now you have an organization seeking certification, that is an OSC. And you have an RPO. Those are those organizations that assist, those provider organizations that are that help those companies get ready for that certification, as you said. And so then you have the C3PAOs, and they are the authorized certifying entities. So now you have an organization that's seeking certification, and you've got an RPO that can help them address all of those deficiencies. They set a baseline, establish that understanding of what is the expectations, collect that evidence, collect that attestation to those, so that not only do they say that's what they do, they can prove that's what they do. And then you have a C3PAO that comes in and validates that. Mm-hmm. It's no longer a self-attestation. I said I did it. It's now we've had a certified third party attest that we have met this compliance. And so I think they've done a really good job of setting this up. And I'm very excited to see this rolled out, because we are now seeing that there is a validation that organizations do those things that they should be doing.
I have a follow-up question, but I want to see, Dave, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, Jax, I just want to make the point that certification or compliance regulations in general are not becoming less complex. You've now got 7 states that have legislation already. You've got 13 more that are exploring legislation. You've got the complexity of GDPR. You've got all this alphabet soup. You've got HIPAA. You've got PCI. You've got this alphabet soup. Some organizations are subject to 5, 6, 10 different compliance mandates and framework objectives. You might have someone that has a ISO 27001 objective from one part of the organization, a TISAX or TIPSR or something from another part of the organization, PCI from another, and that's not getting any less complex. And part of the reason I joined Cyturus in the first place is the ability to crosswalk those things and help people understand that compliance is not the objective. Data protection, information protection is the objective. And so if you can find a way, if you can work with an organization that'll partner with you and provide you that roadmap to get you to a strong information security plan that is manageable, all that compliance stuff can be taken care of as part of that process. But if you focus on that objective, again, a lot of this stuff has overlap, a tremendous amount of overlap. And again, I think that people are going to get more and more confused by this. That's driving into smaller and smaller organizations. The FTC safeguards rule for financial institutions. It's not just banks anymore. It's credit unions. It's credit repair places. It's mortgage brokers. It's payday banks. Sorry,
car dealerships.
Yeah. And the basis for most of these is have a well-documented information security plan. And I think failure to plan is planning to fail. And that's the thing. That's the thing that I'm trying to instill in the people that I talk to. whether it's personal or professional, understanding what your risk posture looks like, and then what to do if something bad happens. Man, if you don't do that, you're in for a nasty surprise. And it's not if you get breached, it's when it happens. It's when you know you got breached.
Yeah. When
I didn't mean sidetrack, sorry.
Oh, no. This is good. That's a good segue, because I'm curious, because when I was working in the CMM space, as really didn't get kicked off, but I got RP certified, and I was working with a company, helping them with an RPO, helping them to get an organization ready before everything got paused. You guys are obviously in the thick of it. I'm curious, from your lens, what have you seen as some of the key challenges organizations are having before they even get to that C3PAO? Is it identifying and classifying their CUI data? Is it documentation? Just curious. Robert?
I'll take that one, because it varies with the organization. Because you have, and I'm going to use that word, maturity. You have different levels of maturity. And I think the first step is understanding what your goal is, what you have to do, what that roadmap is. We had an organization, OSC, needed to go for their CMMC, and they said, we know we are going to have a low score. We just want to start getting ready. And how can you help us? We said, well, we're going to do a baseline. No, we understand that we haven't done that already. We just need you to help us set up a roadmap to get there. We said, because we're going to set a baseline. No, you don't understand. We know we're going to be a bad score. And it took a little bit for them to understand that. Time out. Understand where you are today. Well, we know where we are. Let's document where you are today. So now you've established that baseline. Okay, so your score's a negative 196. Your goal is to be a 110. Now you know where you are. And in that process, it is that education. It is saying, this is what you have to meet. This is where you are. And they said, oh, well, how are we going to get there? Then it's that engagement. It's that consulting. It's okay. Now you understand, in your senior leadership understands where you are. You've set a baseline, a real baseline, a reality. Now set those roadmaps of how you're going to achieve those next steps, achieve where you're going to be. And that has been probably the most challenging thing, is for companies that thought they were at one place. We've had companies that thought they were a 62. Come in, they thought they were 42. We found out that they were actually a negative 112. That's a hard conversation to have with senior leadership, because we're not coming in and saying your team's not doing a good job. It's that they may not completely understand what is required by a certification. And that's the challenge, helping them understand where they are and what it's going to take to get to that goal state.
So I just want to make an emphasis on something that Robert just said. That understanding of where you are. When I talk to kids about goals, one of the things we talk about is if you don't know where you're going, it's impossible to get there. Sometimes the objectives that you have in front of you can seem daunting. One of the ways to make it simple, to simplify it, is to clarify where you're going and understand the steps to get there. That chunking of goals and that breaking it down into smaller objectives is one of the most powerful things that you can do in life in general, and it applies to risk management. It might seem daunting to get that CMMC certification, or reach that ISO 27001 objective, or comply with this board mandate, whatever it ends up being, or comply with something one of your customers is asking you to do. But people are recognizing now that you're going to lose business if you don't have that in place. It's very powerful, that threat of losing business. Contracts that you may already have can be audited. People can go through and say, hey, you're not complying with this. I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to pull that contract. I mean, that's like a term for convenience. If you're not well documented and well prepared, you've almost turned all of your contracts into term for convenience. Because if someone can come in and say, hey, you're not living up to this, and you say, well, yes, I am, and if they say, well, prove it. If you can't, then you've really negated all of the contract deals that you worked hard to put in place. So that idea of understanding where you are, it's one of the first principles as you think about the CIS, for version 8 or whatever it is now. if you think about, that visibility into what you have, that inventory of where you are, that baseline, so to speak, is so important to set. And then understanding it's you don't have to get compliant today. You have to show diligence in recognizing where you are, being able to prove it, then being able to measure against that as you fix things on that journey. And that's the power of what we do at Cyturus.
I love how he ended with that power right there. We are coming up on time. So I want to allow both of you take the stage, do some final thoughts, maybe share how anybody that's listening to this, how they could be able to contact you. I will, just so everybody knows, I will be putting as much as your contact information, LinkedIn, website, all of that. I will be putting that in the show notes. But if there's anything else that you want to share, please do. Robert, I'll let you go first.
All right. I appreciate it. As Dave was saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And how do you pass an audit, especially after you've had an incident? Have documentation to show your overall improvement. And I've been through this with, in the medical field, when they come in after a breach and they start looking at things. If you can show this is where we were, this is our improvement, this is over time, we've said we're improving, and we can validate that improvement. And then we can show this is our next goal. This is our plan to get there. That's your system security plan. And we talk about that in the federal space. We talk about SSPs, and we talk about, Dave's been talking about that security process plan. And there's all these terms and acronyms, but it boils down to the reality is if you can show that, if you can prove that, that is what that investigator is looking for. That's what that auditor is looking for. They're looking for that concerted effort of being able to demonstrate not only that competence, but do you have a plan? Is it effective? And have you been applying it in earnest? And those are the things they're looking for. And that's what we do with Cyturus. That's why I developed this platform. We've not taken the time to talk about it. We have a SaaS solution that provides that to companies where it is compliance agnostic. The tool doesn't care if it's TISAX or TIPS or CMMC. It doesn't care. The tool is designed from the perspective of helping you improve that maturity over time and be able to attest to that you are following a plan, you are planning to succeed, and you can attest to that.
Thank you for that, Robert. Dave, I'm going to pass it to you.
So I first want to thank Robert for his vision, because had he not done what he did in starting this company, Robert one day decided that he was sick of dealing with spreadsheets, and he was sick of walking into an organization and having to validate the huge paperweight that they have from one of the big four, or a large consulting firm, or his consulting firm for that matter. Really understanding how can I help somebody get visibility into where they are, manage them through the process, and then give them a discipline that then they can turn into ongoing management. So many people do a security assessment and they say, oh, hey, I've got my due diligence. I know where I am. I've got this report. I'll stick in a filing cabinet. If anybody asks me, here it is. Or they get a great business impact analysis and they start down the, high priority, easy to fix, and they start knocking those things off. And invariably they get one or two down the list, and then an incident happens, or the CEO comes and says, hey, I want all new laptops for my salespeople, or whatever that ends up being, and they take their eye off the ball and they get distracted. What Cyturus has done is given the market, we really are leaders in this space. And what Robert's vision has done is we've given the market a way to manage that over time, get visibility in that over time.
And I love it how it's not aligned to one specific framework, and it doesn't care. Like, that's very unique, because any of the platforms I've worked with, they're very agnostic to one particular thing, or they're very like honed in on like if it's NIST specifically or if it's ISO. So, all right, we're going to wrap. Thank you both, gentlemen. You've been awesome. I'm excited. We're going to be sending out some short clips of this, so everybody stay tuned on that. And again, make sure to hit subscribe, and I will see you guys all here next week. See ya.